Thank you. Well, finally, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the organization, the RISM, and thanks to the committee for accepting my proposal. And these are the main topics I would like to bring to us today. Really, some of the ideas we have discussed, I think we must not take too much time with these questions, but of course, the work concept has been recently criticized, and on the other side, the source concept has been ampliated by, for example, by the archivistical approach and by the digital revolution. But the question is cataloging sources or cataloging works, and currently we are doing both things. I'd like to stress, to remember that for the common sense repertoire could be understood like all the music or plays, etc., that you can do or perform or what you know. But of course, we are talking here about a very specialized finding aid. The Brazilian archivist Luisa Bellotto, has defined the repertoire in this way. I don't need to read the screen, I'm sure. But the fact is, the repertoire is a highly specialized finding aid. And the question is, the first time I confront this problem was just when we were cataloging the Dom Oscar collection at the Mariana's Museum of Music. Just for an idea, Mariana is near to Belo Horizonte. It's about 400 kilometers far from Rio de Janeiro, and it's just for an idea. It's been really the first project using systematically the RISM guidelines, and I developed a database in Microsoft Access based on the old guidelines translated by our Spanish colleagues. And this is the interface, the first record, with a unique reference code here. And I'd like to show you that we developed a kind of internal code for each musical unit. So UM for Unidade Musical, which is musical unit in Portuguese, 0001. Well, we can look at other records for each work or musical unit within the database. That was an idea for our specific needs, and we described those sources and works. And of course, each source and each work received a unique reference code. Well, the most simple case is just like that first one I showed you. One source for one work. But there are others not so easy. For example, one source for two works. You have here the recto and the verso. So we have in the database the record for this one. Okay, that's the main record. And here the first musical unit linked to the code for the work, modinha in this case. And the second one, which is the valsa with another code. Well, there are more complex cases like this other one. If we have time, we can discuss it a little bit more. And a very common case, one work to several sources. Well, we don't need to talk about FRBR again. I think all of us understand somehow this theory, and we have the musicological approach interested basically in scientific and aesthetical values, but we have also an economical approach oriented to copyright and commercial relations. What it has what relation it has to unique identifiers. We have an example in ISBN. Its importance to the commerce of books is very known, and we can list other identifiers like ESSN, a long list. These are only a few, and I would like to show the IS, the International Standard Work Code, which has been developed to identify precisely the intangible musical work. And we have ISAN, ESTC, which is the same concept for textual works. I could include in this list ISNI, which has been mentioned by Federica Riva today. Well, ISWC has been created by CISAC and IFPI. Of course, there are specific economical interests involved, but the question is, it is a dumb number. It's not developed through interpretation of the data. I can't speak with detail about it, but the fact is this unique identifier intend to give a more efficient administration of rights, of identifying musical works, and exchange of information between right societies, publishers, record companies, and other interest parties on the international level. I think RISM is, of course, a potentially interested party, some of our national work groups. In Brazil, the ISWC agency is ECAD, which is a very problematic institution, but I think we must try to work with them if we want to use this concept. And I think it's interesting how the ISO norm states that the code must be used to identify works, and manifestations and other objects must be identified by ISRC, ISMN, and ISAN, as you know. So we have these possibilities, and ISWC could be used to identify each work as an abstract concept, and the other levels of RBR could be identified by so many different international standards and of course for each specific reference code in an archive, library, or documentation centers. Of course, it must be applied on manuscript sources, not only in printed editions, etc. Well, it's interesting to observe that in archives, normally each source receives a unique identifier, a reference code. Well, this is the structure of ISWC. It's, it's curious because the prefix is T for tune, and we have here an example. The ISO norm states that this identificator can be used, can be assigned to published or unpublished works, newly created or already existing works, irrespective of its copyright status, including modified versions, excerpts, and composite musical works. Interesting that even works which are in public domain can receive a specific ISWC. Well, I have not time to comment with detail, but these are the elements for creating an ISWC, at least one original title, all creators of the work with their respective roles. If the work is derived, the type of derivation, and in this case, the ISWC for the original work. Well, we saw these first two examples: one work, one source; the second, one work, or one source, one work. The first, the second, one source, two works, and we have this one, which is a very complex case, a fragment with many small pieces for guitar. CDO 01 352. It's a document we cataloged in 2002, and of course, it's very difficult to describe a unique source with 31 small pieces. And after years, we discovered that 30 of them are part of Matteo Carcassi's method, published here in Mainz, I think, in 1836. Well, one piece, although, is not present in the method of Carcassi. Well, it's the typical complex example of the task in cataloging music manuscripts. Well, the last example is Modinha from the National Library of Portugal. And this work has received an ISWC, that's the record in the ISWC net, the database. And so you must see here the actual ISWC for the work. So we have here an unique identifier for the work level. We have here a first expression or manifestation and the specific code in the National Library of Portugal. And a second expression, which is a CD, 18th century Portuguese modinhas with its own code. Well, that's my last example, and I think I showed for you quickly how this unique identifier can help us in our tasks. It can enable a direct link among several sources within a database, like our domestic solution in the old Microsoft Access database for the Mariana's Music Museum, but it can also connect several different information systems. Well, I think it could be an adequate unique identifier, and although it's been proposed and used by music industry and copyright agencies, it can be improved and used for cataloging. I think we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, or at least we should reinvent a better wheel. But in the case of our database, we are considering to use this identifier, but it is in consideration still. Well, before finishing, I should say that we have a very difficult situation in Brazil. The current fascist government is attacking our universities and our research institutions, as well as our cultural institutions. And, for example, the Petrobras Cultural Program, which was the main source for this important project in Mariana's Museum of Music, is now closed. And last week, the government cut 30 to 40% of public universities and research agencies' budgets. So it's really tragic for us, but we must fight for our future, and we need a strong articulation with our colleagues to reverse the situation. I think we need to consolidate our initiatives in Brazil, as well as the YAML and the YAML branches and the ABMUS, which is the Brazilian Association of Musicologists. To finish with a good notice, we are developing with Portuguese colleagues a new translation of RISM guidelines to Portuguese, and we intend to release it this year. Thank you.